It's that episode that we've been teasing for a little bit. That episode that we've wanted to talk about. It's that episode where Ava might finally quit the podcast and decide I'm a bad co-host. We're going to talk about one of her favorite directors today, Taika Waititi. Welcome to 21st Century Cinema. It's the podcast about film and the film industry. I'm one of your hosts, Joseph Delavecchia, and joining me today is my lovely original co-host, Ava Crivello. Ava, hello, how are you?
I'm good, how are you?
I'm doing all right. So Ava, we've talked about Taika before on the show, our topic for today.
Yeah.
We have discussed him last year for the Oscars. We discussed him when we discussed Thor Ragnarok a while back in our MCU episode. And now we are going to talk about three big movies from his career. I think his three biggest, unless there's one that I just don't know about. We're going to talk about them. We're going to compare our notes on what we think of him as a director. And I think it's going to be an interesting episode. We were supposed to do this episode back in November, but it's been pushed back till now, our January episode. Our first episode back, by the way, Season 3.
Ooh, Season 3, wow.
Season 3 of 21st Century Cinema. Did you think we'd make it here?
Yeah, definitely, 100%.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, for sure.
So, we're going to talk about three movies today. It's What We Do in the Shadows, Jojo Rabbit, and Thor Ragnarok. Those are going to be the three big movies we're going to talk about. And I might also reference some things from Taika's time directing The Mandalorian, because I also know his work from there. And I know there's another movie you were talking about that's like a love letter to New Zealand, you called it?
Kind of. I think it's just a love letter to how he grew up more so. But I think What We Do in the Shadows probably, I mean, it's one of his biggest movies, but Hunt for the Wilder People, I would say, was a lot bigger than that movie in terms of, like, I don't know how many people saw it and everything. And how
I've never even heard of it.
What? Oh my gosh, you're doing an episode on Taika Waititi. You haven't even watched one of his biggest movies.
I told you which three movies we were going to watch. You didn't think to say, this movie's a bit bigger, we should do this one.
I guess I just phased it out. I just was like, oh yeah, he's named the important ones there. I didn't bother to check. But you've seen at least some of the important ones.
I've seen the three movies we're talking about today. I've seen.
Okay.
So let's get it started with What We Do in the Shadows, a mockumentary film. I usually enjoy a good mockumentary. I'm gonna be honest though, I did not enjoy What We Do in the Shadows.
Oh my gosh, Joe told me this the other day in the car, and I don't remember my exact words, but I think it was along the lines of, "Oh my gosh, you crazy motherfucker."
No, that's because you have no sense of humor, you motherfucker. Those were your words.
That's because you have no sense of humor, you motherfucker.
Mm-hmm.
How do you not like What We Do in the Shadows? It's literally one of the funniest movies I've ever seen.
So I'm not saying it's like completely unfunny. Like, I enjoy some scenes. I enjoy Taika's performance in it. But the movie is, like, it doesn't really have a purpose. Like, there's no real plot. Like, yes, it's a mockumentary, but it's like a mockumentary is like exploring something. It doesn't really explore these vampires. They're just vampires doing random stuff.
Well,
it is so weird.
The story is about the one guy that, I forget his name because it's been a while since I moved it, but the new vampire that's, like, introduced and how he...
Nick.
It's about Nick. That's the mockumentary. But you watch something like The Office. The Office isn't about anything. It's just random. It's just an office of people just doing whatever.
The characters, though, at least have arcs that you care about. I don't care about anyone's arc in this. Like, they talk about it at the beginning of the movie.
But you don't watch The Office for the arc. You watch it because it's funny. If you watch The Office for the arcs, I think you need to watch better television.
But you at least need, like, a story there for your comedy. Your comedy still needs a story. There
so
isn't
funny.
that
It's
much of a story.
Deadpan. I think you're the only one I've ever spoken to that has this sentiment where you think it's not funny, that it's not a good movie.
I don't think it's funny.
Joe. You like The Breakfast Club, and what's your favorite TV show? It's Friends, or what's your
Friends is not my favorite TV show.
What's a TV show you find very funny? I guarantee
a TV
it's not
show
even that funny.
I find you very funny. I think The Good Place is really funny. Brooklyn Nine-Nine's really funny. Parks and Rec.
Parks and Rec is funny, I'll give you that. The other two, like, try so hard to be funny and so, like, amicable that it's a little bit despicable. You just have to appreciate, like, dry humor when it's just, like, I don't know, not trying so hard to have a feel-good moment at the end or trying hard to have a forced punchline. Anyways, this is really shocking, and I think if you're listening and you have not seen What We Do in the Shadows, you are really missing out. Everyone I've ever spoken to, except for dear Joseph here, has literally loved this movie so much. So please go watch it. It's actually hilarious. It's amazing. The characters are so lovable too. What do you mean you don't care about the characters? And there are arcs.
Okay, so let's talk about one of these arcs. The Beast arc. So is that Jermaine Clement's guy, the guy with the beast and everything? I don't know which one Jermaine Clement is.
Oh man, I forget which characters are named what. Give me a second here. Okay. No, what's the Beast? Wait, what?
The Beast is the ex-girlfriend.
Oh, no. Jermaine Clement is the other vampire, oh man, I don't know their names. Give me a second here.
Yeah, but is he the one who dated the Beast, is my question.
Oh, yes, he is. Yeah.
Yes, okay. So that whole arc, like, it's just, like, mentioned, like, once at the beginning, and then it comes in to be the big main thing for the last 20 minutes, like, pretty much out of nowhere.
Yeah.
With no build-up, nothing.
No. First of all, this is a deadpan comedy movie. Second of all, that's an underlying arc, and it is kind of referenced throughout the movie. It's not the main focus. The main focus is on Nick, and the main focus is it's just capturing a day in the life of these vampires. That's the mockumentaries. It's just funny stuff. And there's also, the arc with the human woman that's like whatever with Taika's character. Oh, I can't think.
The old lady.
Yeah. That like.
Yeah,
then,
the old lady that he loved once and then.
No, not that one. No, the human lady that's his ward or whatever that like does.
No, that's a different one. That's the other vampire.
Oh, the other vampire. Oh, yeah.
That's the third vampire.
Anyways, this is like peak comedy. This movie is so funny. I don't know if we're here to debate whether it's a good movie or not, or if we're here to talk about it and what Taika's.
We can do both here.
This movie, it's worth mentioning that it wasn't just directed by Taika Waititi. It was co-directed with him and Jermaine Clement. That it's the two of them.
So this movie got a spin-off into a TV show, which is on TV now. It's had 2 seasons going into a third. Mark Hamill was on an episode. But so let's talk though about the movie mainly though, and Taika himself in it. So in performance-wise, I think he is funny in this movie. I think he's a fine actor. Usually the roles he does, they're not super serious roles. They're just fun roles, especially in his own movies. So as an actor, he does a fine job there. But directing-wise, what year was this movie made? Because I don't know. Like, is it on purposely made to look like bad film quality?
Yes, it's a mockumentary. Okay. That's the point. It was made 2014, but the point is it's a mockumentary, so it's supposed to seem like it's just like a ragtag crew with like a camcorder or something, who accidentally were like let inside. We didn't even go over what the premise of the movie is. I just started grilling you about it. So yeah, it's a mockumentary about like these vampires that are all living together. They're housemates in a flat because they're in New Zealand, and yeah, it's really funny. It just kind of follows these 3, I guess technically 4 vampires that live there, and then there's a 5th vampire that they end up turning, and he's just like a normal guy, then he becomes a vampire, and how he integrates into that. And it's just really funny. It's really like deadpan, dry, Kiwi humor. And yeah, it's co-directed, Taika Waititi, Jermaine Clement. Bit of background, Jermaine Clement is the guy from Flight of the Conchords, and he played the big crab in Moana. Okay.
Oh, he's the big crab in Moana?
He's the big crab in Moana. I like how that's what you recognize him from.
The shiny guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't like Moana, but the music in that movie slaps. I'll give it that.
You don't like Moana? Okay, never mind.
I don't like Moana.
That's not what we're talking about.
But
let's move past that.
Yes. So the directing style is completely fine. Like, it is directed like to look exactly like a mockumentary, and a camera crew is like a novice like camera crew is doing it. It's done really well. There's a lot of good shots that are like spy shots where it's made to look like, they don't realize they're being recorded. There's talking heads. It's framed nicely. Like, this movie doesn't, like, it does what it's supposed to do in a directing job. There's nothing really special about it, but I think that's good because it doesn't need to offer anything special for what it's trying to be. Do you know what I mean?
It's just supposed to be dry pan humor. It's not supposed to be like overproduced or whatever. And I also would like to say that I think like the costume design is really good as well. That the vampires, like, you know, they dress for the time period that they're from, but when they try and like dress normal, you can tell that they have like, you know, that they're like outdated by like several hundred years.
I don't know if you know this, but the makeup, the costumes, like in a bunch of the set stuff, a lot of it is leftover stuff from Lord of the Rings that they got from the studios in New Zealand.
Oh, that's amazing. I love that. I didn't know that. That's awesome, actually.
Yeah, they got that, and like pretty much like that's where most Taika was saying. I forget if it was an interview I saw him or if he mentioned this when they were talking about special effects in the Mandalorian behind the scenes documentary. But I just remember him talking about it. He mentions that like pretty much everything used on Shadows was just like stuff that the movie studios were just like, yeah, we have this extra stuff, this old stuff that's just lying around, and they just took that and ran with whatever they could make out of these things. And a lot of it was from Lord of the Rings, which is really cool.
That is really cool. And I'll say another thing that I think is one of Taika Waititi's like strong points. The comedic timing in this film is spot on. Like the timing is just so funny. The edits, like everything, it's so good. I would say he definitely has that strong point when it comes to the comedic part of his films. Just like the way lines are delivered, the way the shots flow into each other. Yeah, it's a really funny movie.
No, he's really good. He's really, really good with comedic timing, and we'll get to that in the second movie we're going to talk about, which is Jojo Rabbit.
Oh, yes, Rabbit.
Jojo Rabbit is my favorite Taika Waititi film I've seen. It was one of my favorite films of last year. I'm glad it got a lot of Academy Award recognition. It got a lot of buzz around it. It was really, really great. So this movie stars Taika as Hitler, which is absolutely hilarious. But so it's about a little boy named Jojo growing up in Nazi Germany, and his personal hero, is Adolf Hitler, and his imaginary best friend is also Adolf Hitler, which is who Taika plays. He plays an imaginary Hitler, and he's just going through his life he's a little kid who just wants to be the best Nazi, but he's going to learn that the Nazis aren't that great in the middle of World War II. And it's very enjoyable, very heartfelt, very well directed. And what I like a lot about this film is, especially like if you watch Shadows and Thor Ragnarok, the two that we're talking about today besides this movie, they're very light and very funny, and there's a lot of jokes in it. Like there's a lot, like it doesn't take itself too seriously. But this movie knows when to take itself seriously. It knows when to have powerful, heartfelt moments. It knows when to pull on your heartstrings, and it knows when to be funny. My favorite scene in this entire movie is just the scene with all the Nazis in the room hailing Hitler to each other for like 2 minutes. It's just so well done. And even though that seems like something that would just be so overplayed or like not a very smart move to do, it is like it perfectly fits in this movie. It perfectly fits with the theme and tone, and it doesn't stop the movie dead in its tracks. It does such a great job. I think almost everything Taika does in this movie, he's spot on with. Like, he is playing an over-the-top, hilarious version of Hitler. Like, there's a scene where he's literally eating unicorn because Jojo believes that Hitler feasts on unicorn. Like,
yeah,
it's amazing. It's amazing. It's such a great film. I love it so much. There's such a great cast. Sam Rockwell is also in it. Scarlett Johansson is in it. Rebel Wilson is in it. Like, all these people who are playing serious yet funny. Well, except Rebel Wilson. Her role is just comedy the entire way through. But, like, Scarlett Johansson, she's got a funny role that also has some comedy. And Sam Rockwell, his role he's hilarious in what he does, too.
He's amazing, yeah.
Playing the closeted Nazi.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an amazing movie, and I definitely think, like, the timing, again, like that scene you were talking about, I think we actually spoke about it when we were talking about Oscars last year.
I think we did too.
The timing is perfect in that scene, and just every scene, and he's able to have, like, a scene that will have you crying, and then laughing, and then, like, empathizing, just, like, one right after the other, and it's seamless, it's not forced. It's also worth mentioning that what I love most about him playing Hitler is that he's half Polynesian, half Jewish. So it's just like, I don't know, it's just really nice, that touch to it.
What I also really like, though, about him playing Hitler, though, is that, like, even though he's playing this over-the-top, like, goofier version of Hitler, he's not, like, making it like a slapstick gag, though. Like, he's still, like, he has a German accent. He still has, like, the posture and everything, and he looks the part. Like, even though it's making fun of Hitler, he still is Hitler. Like, it's still in some way realistic. You know, it is what a little boy would pretty much imagine Hitler as.
It's exactly that, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I really enjoyed that about it. And the directing in this movie is also great. The shots are great. A really powerful shot that comes to mind in this movie is when Jojo's walking and he finds out that his mother's been hanged.
Spoiler alert, man.
Okay, we spoil everything on this show. When have we ever done a spoiler-free episode?
I guess.
On this show.
That's a big spoiler, but okay.
I'll put spoilers in the description. We see that his mom's been hanged, and he just sees her shoes, which were a big focus in a few shots earlier on. But it's done while they're dancing. So it's very casually focused on, where you don't realize it's going to be like a big thing until suddenly like the shoes in that shot, it's a big thing, and it's
so make sure that you like recognize the shoes, that you know that you associate it with like this very pleasant, very full of life woman, so that when you see it, it hits you just as hard as it hits Jojo, that like moment of realization. Yeah,
it's so well done, this movie. It's absolutely beautiful, and yeah, I think it's fantastic. Jojo Rabbit, great film. And what I also like so much about Jojo Rabbit is that, like, once again, it just, like, I find my biggest problem with Taika's films is that they're always, like, there's always a joke, there's always a punchline, there's always some sort of,
they're comedies,
like, yeah, no, I get that, but, like, even though in a comedy, like, not every 5 seconds or every line needs to be a joke or a big haha thing.
I don't think his movies are like that at all, actually.
My biggest problem with Thor Ragnarok is that movie doesn't take itself seriously when it needs to take itself seriously, but this movie does, and it restored my faith in Taika a little bit.
Thor Ragnarok is maybe the only one like that. With a movie like Thor, I hate the other Thor movies. I think
the other Thor movies are not strong, I'll give you that.
Thor movies, it's hard to take something like that seriously. That's my huge problem with like Marvel and especially DC movies, is they take themselves way too seriously, and it's hard to also take those movies seriously. So the only thing I would say where he's like, there's just constant jokes and it rarely takes itself seriously, is Thor Ragnarok, but I think that is exactly what Thor Ragnarok needed. Anyways.
We'll get to Thor Ragnarok in a few minutes. But I've pretty much talked this entire time about Jojo Rabbit, Ava. You go ahead, talk about Taika, his performance, his directing, just lay it on me.
So I've said a bit about it. So, like, his comedic timing is very present, and his, like, amazing, likable characters. He's so great with characters and everything. Also, like, the colors, like, the color coding used in the movie is great. Just the idea and the writing, it's just original, and it's really hard to make a movie about World War II, especially set in Nazi Germany, like, funny and lighthearted.
It is. No, that's a great accomplishment.
It's really hard, because it's so taboo, like, to be like, oh, this kid, his imaginary friend is Hitler, and his mom is harboring, like, a Jewish girl upstairs. Like, that seemed, like, you know what I mean? That's a pretty out there pitch for a movie. And he just made it work where you're watching it, and not at one point do you think, like, who thought of this? Whose idea? This is so weird. Like, it just fits so perfectly. It works so well. And it also, like, does kind of touch on the darker side of things, where he's in the Hitler Youth, and so is his friend and everything. And it kind of shows, you know, the dangers of complacency, and shows it from a child's perspective, how easy it was for him to get wrapped up in Nazi Germany. And then there's the girl upstairs, how easy it was for him to empathize with the Jewish girl and everything like that. Like, I think it really touches on, like, the important topics that other World War II films do, while still being, like, such a lighthearted, I mean, for the most part, there are sad parts, but do you know what I'm trying to say? Like, it's it ticks off all the boxes, which is really hard to do with a movie about World War II. Yeah.
Yeah, no, he definitely gets the tone right, and he does something that seems impossible and tasteless, and makes it tasteful, and seriously, one of the best movies of last year. Like I said before, I'll say it again, one of the best movies of last year. I saw this movie, and when I was going to go in to watch this movie, I planned just to watch a comedy, and I was pleasantly surprised at how much I loved this movie and how great it was overall as a whole. Yeah. Very strong.
Okay.
All right, let's move on now to the final movie we're going to talk about, Thor Ragnarok. So, Thor Ragnarok is the third installment of Thor after Thor 1 and Thor in the Dark World. The first two Thors were not very strong and not very well received. They're not great movies. They're not, and I will 100% agree on that. But Taika was brought in to give a fresh new perspective, and he does. And I'm really torn on this movie. So we're Shadows I don't really like, and JoJo I love. Ragnarok is somewhere in the middle there. Because while I do love this movie as a comedy, and I do love that the humor it brings, I find though that while it's a good, fun movie, it's not a good Thor movie. Mainly for the fact that this movie has to have moments where it needs to take itself seriously, and it doesn't, which I get. Nobody really takes Thor seriously, okay? He's not a serious person. And in fact, like, his whole entire thing is that he's overly serious. Like, he doesn't understand customs really on Earth, and he doesn't understand sarcasm, or just, well, what's the word I'm looking for? Metaphors. He doesn't understand metaphors, things like that. So, obviously, yeah, he needed to add some comedy to this, but he takes it like so over the top in this movie, I find. Now, Taika also wrote this movie, and he wrote Jojo Rabbit, and he wrote Shadows as well. So, and Jojo Rabbit, really well written. Shadows, yeah, it's decently written. And Thor, once again, moments it needs to take itself seriously. For example, Thor is the god of thunder. He has lightning powers as well, but a simple, small little zap of lightning renders him completely powerless and useless for a good 70% of the film.
Are you waiting for me to talk now?
If you want to respond to that, or I can just keep going.
I just think that your opinion is kind of garbage on both Thor and What We Do in the Shadows. That, I don't know how you can be a movie person who, like, appreciates when movies are well made and like a movie like The Breakfast Club, but then turn around and not like What We Do in the Shadows, and then...
What do you have against The Breakfast Club so much?
It sucks. It's one of the worst. It's the most overrated movie. I think, in my opinion, it's the most overrated movie.
Okay, but, like, I feel like I may have made it the most overrated movie for you just because of how much I love it and talk about it.
A lot of people like it, but it's a terrible movie. It's just plays into stereotypes. Anyways, this is not a podcast for The Breakfast Club. Maybe we should do that one day, just so you can experience feeling how I'm feeling right now. These are, like, my favorite movies. Taika Waititi is probably my ultimate favorite director. Thor Ragnarok, I think, takes itself seriously at some times, but the damage that they did to Thor's character is so hard to come back from. So hard. They made him so boring. He's not meant to be the character who everything goes over his head. He's not supposed to be, like, a stupid character. He's supposed to be confused and foreign to, like, Earth's customs, which he still is. Taika just made him more closer, honestly, what he is like in some of the comics. But now, see, made him more likable. I hated Thor before. Now I love Thor. Made all the characters more likable. It's such a fun movie. You go and you watch this movie and you have a good time. You know what I mean? You watch this movie, you're having a good time.
You do have a good time. I won't deny that. There are also some really memorable and fun scenes in this. The cast is great. It adds Jeff Goldblum, who is great in his role as the Grand Master. Tessa Thompson is fantastic as Valkyrie.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. The cast is amazing. But I think the directing is even better. And the writing is also even better. I think it becomes difficult when you try and compare it to the first two Thor movies, that it is just so different that there is a bit of, like, inconsistency. But I think that's exactly what they wanted, because the first two Thor movies just did not work at all. At all, right? They just sucked. I hate them so much.
They do. They do suck.
Anyone that cries about this not being the real Thor, like, sorry, you're a crybaby who wants, like, Marvel to stay boring and make the same movies forever. Like, I think this is exactly what Thor needed and exactly what the Marvel Cinematic Universe needed, especially at that time, and what it needs going forward. I'm getting pretty tired. A lot of people are getting tired of, like, the MCU formula that's being...
Yeah, 100% tired of the MCU formula.
And looking at all the movies coming, the only one that I'm, like... I mean, I'm excited for some, but the one I'm most excited for is the new Thor movie. The rest, I'm like, I could go without watching almost all of the other ones. But Thor,
so you say that,
I'm
Ava,
not missing Thor.
When the new Thor movie was announced, it was announced with a bunch of other Marvel Studios projects, and that was last summer. And we put out a little poll on our Instagram asking what people were most excited for out of these new Marvel shows, and majority of our fan base did say Thor: Love and Thunder.
Yeah, exactly. It's because it's so new and fresh, and I think that's exactly what they asked him to do, is they wanted him to make it comedic and different. So you can't beg on him for making it different, but you can definitely.
I'm not mad that he made it different. But what's also bad, though, about this, too, is like, okay, even if we take Taika's version and we say that's the new Thor, this is Thor going forward. If you then take Thor in the next two movies, which are Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame, Thor is back to being his normal self that we see before. He's not that same Thor that we saw from Taika. The Russo brothers just essentially take this Thor and reverse it. So now there's no consistency between these characters.
No, I think it's pretty consistent. He's really funny and just like a happy golden retriever. Like when he comes up in Endgame and he's like, fat Thor. He's the exact same as he is in Ragnarok, in my opinion, besides, quote unquote, letting himself go. But I think that's very consistent with Taika Waititi's image of it because the entire studio received it well, including the Russo brothers and Chris Hemsworth especially. I think maybe you're getting it mixed up with the other movies that came before because it's pretty consistent.
I'm not. I've only watched those movies once, and that was years ago. I'll never watch them again. But
No, I mean with the other, how he's portrayed in other like Avengers movies and stuff like that. But in Infinity War and Endgame, I don't remember him in Infinity War, not gonna lie, but in Endgame when he shows up, it's...
Infinity War is when he's with Peter Dinklage. And Peter Dinklage is a giant.
No, that's pretty consistent. That is so consistent. I don't know what you're talking about.
No, I disagree.
It's really consistent. I think you're just plain wrong. This isn't an agree or disagree. It's like a fact, and the fact is it's consistent. So...
there are good scenes. Like the movie is shot really well. It's directed really well. And it is a fun ride. And Taika once again plays a character in this movie. He plays Korg, the rock guy. I don't know if he's like a rock monster, a rock person. There's no real name for his race. But he's Korg. He's a guy made of rocks. He tried to start a revolution, but he didn't put up enough flyers. And like that part is also great. And the stuff with Tom Hiddleston, like when they do that scene with Get Help, that's a great scene, and it really shows that brotherly bondness and love and relationship to Thor and Loki.
Yeah,
but
which
once
I think
again
has failed so often in the movies previous, where you just don't feel it the way you feel it in this movie.
And like once again though, there are like scenes though where like they need to be a little bit more serious. Like Thor is like trapped on this planet and he needs to like get off and go save his home from his evil sister who he just found out that he has, and he's just treating everything like a joke, prancing around with Mark Ruffalo. No.
They're pretty set in like being determined and trying to do that. It's not like they're not working towards the goal. Just the way it's presented is more in a comedic manner, but the characters definitely are driven and they are taking it seriously. It's just, again, pretty lighthearted. And what I love about Taika Waititi, his movies, we can talk about, probably after we talk about the specific movies, we can talk about his directing style, but is how he's able to have these really serious undertones while it's still a lighthearted comedic movie. I would say Thor Ragnarok has the same energy and vibe as Jojo Rabbit at almost all points throughout the movie, as well as his other movie, which you haven't seen, Hunt for the Wilder People, which also, deals with a foster child kind of running away and then getting lost in the forest with his foster dad, which seems a bit like a heavy topic, but again, it's treated the exact same way. And it's so admirable and perfect and just... So you are... point blank period, incorrect and wrong about What We Do in the Shadows and Thor Ragnarok. Okay.
Anything else you want to add on to that?
I just think that you should pay attention when you're watching movies, maybe.
I am paying attention when I watch movies,
Apparently
but it
not.
doesn't change the fact that like this movie is about a superhero who is a god who should not be weak to lightning because he controls lightning, but he is rendered almost powerless by lightning for a good 70% of the movie, and then all of a sudden he's mastered all this lightning power.
So
what's that about?
That's what I would call a plot hole that I don't think is on Taika Waititi, because he is not the people who write the comics and the people who he would refer to for something like that. Because he doesn't know all of
He
those
still
history.
wrote the movie. He needs to know at least what his power set is.
Obviously he does, Joe, but he's not the one who's read all the comics that asks about these specific things. He has ideas and there's people who reference it, and he's not the sole writer. He didn't write the entire every little detail. This is given to him by people who are meant to know, and you can blame Marvel for being inconsistent, but you cannot blame Taika Waititi for stuff like that. The amount of plot holes
I can
like
easily blame Taika Waititi
No.
for his decision to have Thor get captured, which is fine. Thor gets captured, okay? And Thor is forced to fight in this tournament. That is fine. But the reason why Thor can't fight back and escape this tournament is because something is keeping him there. And the thing that he chooses is a small chip that zaps him with lightning. Why? When then he has Thor master the power of lightning at the end of the film, even though Thor has had the power of lightning before. So why is it that?
95% certain that Taika Waititi chose that exact thing. He just said, I want Thor to be stuck here. I need something that's stuck. And then kind of talked with this group of people. That is such a specific, like, comic book nerd. Like, it's a specific plot hole, and you can argue, yeah, it's a huge thing. It just wouldn't fly. It doesn't make sense with Thor's character. But it's not like Taika Waititi made every single detail of the movie. He needed him stuck there for something, and this is something that worked. I'm sorry if you're going to be a little crybaby about it, but I'm going to say that it's on Marvel and the people.
I'm saying that it's on Taika. He wrote the screenplay. His name is on the screenplay.
Write that part, but that is such a, it doesn't fit with the lore. It doesn't make sense with the character. You're being
because it doesn't make sense with the entire movie as a whole. Because once again, Taika makes the decision to have that big fight at the end with all the lightning power that Thor suddenly can use.
So I completely disagree with you on this, and I just don't think you're going to budge and understand what I'm saying. So we can talk about it
I understand what you're saying, but I think you're wrong, though, about what you're saying. I think Taika made this choice and that he wrote this, and he just didn't think of this.
Yeah, because everyone at Marvel that exactly knows, they're like, oh yeah, this is fine, we're going to let that fly. No, they fact check everything. So this is them saying, okay, we're going to make an exception here because this is what needs to happen for the story to progress, okay? Okay. What we're going to do right now is we're going to make an exception here and move past this and progress to the next thing, okay?
I'm trying to see how much control Taika had on the Thor Ragnarok script now.
He didn't write, when someone writes a screenplay, they write it and they edit it, but it's not like he knows all of Thor's history. It's not like he knew the characters' names even, right? Mm-hmm. Marvel came to him with a premise. We want you to write a story. This is the idea of it. You can get from point A to point B however you want. Here you go. It's like he couldn't magically make Thor have the ability of telekinesis, right? Because Marvel would look over the screenplay and be like, now that's a no-go. That can't happen. That is not Thor's power. You can't make that come out of nowhere, right? I'm not saying that someone else wrote it, but he needed from point A to point B something to happen. It's on Marvel for letting him, you know what I mean? But this is really not something for us to argue right now, because I understand how it works, okay?
Okay, I'm gonna disagree.
Okay, agree to disagree, but I understand it more than you do, apparently. Anyways. So, those are all three movies that you've seen, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, I think technically his first movie that he's, yeah, it is the first movie that he's, credited as a director. He also co-directed with Jermaine Clement, and it's called Eagle vs. Shark, and it stars Jermaine Clement. Taika's not in it at all. And this is just a pure, deadpan, awkward comedy. It's about just, two awkward people and, a relationship happening. It's a good movie, but it's not as great as the other ones. Again, it's his first movie, and I don't think he's developed a style that much. And that was 2007, and then 2010, this is the one that you referenced to before that I was talking about. It's called Boy, and it's really just about a boy named Boy growing up in a small town in New Zealand who's Maori, which is the same ethnic background that Taika Waititi is, and who kind of has different hardships that was kind of associated with Taika Waititi's childhood as well. This is a more serious movie. But it is still, I don't want to call it a comedy, but it still kind of is a comedy. There's funny parts. But if you watch this, it becomes so clear what Taika Waititi's style is. Because when he does, Thor Ragnarok, he has to cater to Marvel. He has to kind of stick to a set canon and a set frame and stuff like that. But this is really his first standalone movie. I think this movie's probably, his baby, really, because it was the first thing that he had total control. And after you watch this movie, all of the other movies you watch of his, it's so clear what his directing style is. You can definitely see that he takes inspiration from Wes Anderson at times, where there's these shots where it's kind of stagnant, where things are placed in very particular placements to kind of display exactly what he wants it to display exactly at that time, and it feels very like orchestrated, almost like it's like a, you know, a photo or a Renaissance painting sometimes. Also like symmetric at times. He's in this as well. He plays Boy's dad in the movie, who's like a kind of a deadbeat dad who just got out of prison type of thing. I really love this movie, and it was after I watched this movie that I really, really started to appreciate Taika Waititi. And it's also worth mentioning that before all these movies, Taika Waititi had a short film that was nominated for an Academy Award that's called like Two Kids, One Car or something like that, which, I mean, sounds like it's referencing something else, but it's really good. But Boy actually came out of that short film, that he decided to take one character from that short film and make a movie about him. Yeah, so that's my little rant on Boy. It's an amazing movie. So his first movie... Sorry, go ahead.
So is it based on his life, or
No.
is it just like based on essentially like the place where he grew up?
I think it's just based on like the New Zealand experience kind of thing. Like it's pure like... I feel like now I feel like I know what it's like to grow up in like the whatever it is, late 80s, early 90s in New Zealand. Now I feel like I kind of grew up there. Like it's just kind of about that experience.
This movie the reason why you want to go abroad to New Zealand for like a year?
I always wanted to go abroad to New Zealand, but I watched this movie because I wanted to. You know what I mean? I love New Zealand so much. And then I got into New Zealand, and like the biggest New Zealand movies are Taika Waititi. So then I got into it through that. But his first movie, Eagle versus Shark, out of 10, I'd give that one like a 7. It's still a good movie, better than most, but it's meant to be awkward, but just things that aren't meant to be awkward are, and it just misses beats comedically sometimes. Boy is a solid 9 out of 10 in my books. And then the next one, which we've already talked about, 2014, is What We Do in the Shadows. What would you give this 1 out of 10?
A 6.5 probably.
Oh, okay, I'd give this one probably an 8.5. Yeah, 8.5 out of 10. I think the only thing they could have done better is, I don't know actually, maybe it's a 9 out of 10, because I don't know what they could have done better. It's a very funny movie. Okay, moving forward, next one, 2016, Hunt for the Wilder People, which you have not seen and I have talked about briefly. It is also a fantastic movie. This one was the biggest movie in New Zealand for a long time, until Thor Ragnarok and Jojo Rabbit came out respectively. But this movie is amazing. You should go and watch it, Joe, and everyone listening should watch it. I know it's on Canadian Netflix. I'm going to assume it's on other countries' Netflix as well. So yeah, it's about a foster care child. He's kind of placed with foster care mom and dad. This is the premise of the movie. I'm not spoiling anything, but after the foster care mom passes, he runs away, and the foster care dad kind of goes looking after him in the forest or the bush or whatever they call it in New Zealand, just like an expanse of wilderness. And then the news frames it that the foster care dad has abducted the son and is like, you know, running away with him type of thing. So it kind of follows their adventure, and again, it's really, really heartfelt, and it's kind of similar to Boy in the sense that it's about like a kid that's in kind of a hardship where he doesn't really have anyone to look out for, and the relationship that kid has with other people, which again which also is very relevant to Jojo Rabbit, where the main character is like a kid who's kind of lost and confused, and you see it from a kid's perspective of the world. You know what I mean? It's the same. You've only seen Jojo Rabbit, but you know how it feels like you kind of are Jojo, the way you see the world and the way you see things?
I don't really get that vibe from the movie, but okay, I can see what you mean.
Really, the way Hitler's presented, how you see that and you hear kind of Jojo's thoughts and...
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's kind of like somewhat of a whimsical sense to it, but also you feel for Jojo. You can tell there's like, you know, a kid is the main character who's like lost, confused, and there's people around them type of thing. It's the same idea, so I think that's interesting that those are really his 3 standalone movies, I guess, because What We Do in the Shadows and Eagle vs. Shark was with Jermaine Clement, and Thor Ragnarok and the other stuff he's done is like working for a company. So all the movies he's had like total control over were about, you know, kids as like the main character. which is kind of cool. And again, his directing style is super, super prevalent in Hunt for the Wilder People. It's amazing. And in the next movie, or for that movie, I'm going to give it's 10 out of 10 in my books. The next one is 2017, Thor Ragnarok. We spoke about it. What would you give it out of 10?
I don't know what I give Thor. I go back and forth on Thor so much.
Try and think of it objectively, fun. Just as a movie. Try and think of
just as a movie. It's probably a good 7.5 for me.
Okay.
But I want to rate it a little lower just because I feel like it's not consistent with Thor and that I feel like it should have been a little bit more serious. Like, but the comedy is good. Like, I do enjoy the comedy. There's a lot of shots that I enjoy, and there's a lot of moments that I enjoy from it.
You can give it 2 scores. So if it's 7 out of 10 as a movie, what would it be as, like, part of the MCU?
Part of the MCU, I think this movie's a 5, maybe a 6.
Gosh. Is it not one of your favorite movies in the MCU, or not?
No, it's not. It's not. I don't even know where I'd rank it, but it's definitely not in my top 10.
Out of top 10? Oh my gosh! Out of curiosity, what's your number 1 MCU film?
The Winter Soldier. It's the best MCU film made.
That's my number 1 as well.
It is the best one made.
What's your number 2? I'm just looking for one to get angry at right now.
Number 2?
Yeah.
Maybe Infinity War. I don't know. I'd have to look at them all and go back. Maybe Infinity. Maybe Spider-Man: Far From Home. That one is really well done.
That's good as well.
I do like Spider-Man: Far From Home.
I guess top 10. There's just so many of them. Okay. Mm-hmm. And then, since then, we've only had Jojo Rabbit. What would you give Jojo Rabbit out of 10?
Jojo Rabbit's a solid 9.5 to 10 for me. Like, it's pretty much a near perfect movie.
Same.
Like that, I don't have anything really wrong or bad to say about that movie.
I give it that one as well. Exactly. So,
like, there are especially like movies. Well, I find the biggest problem with movies today that I complain about a lot is pacing in movies. I find that people don't know how to pace a movie anymore, but Taika still does. Like, the movie does pace well.
His pacing is amazing. He includes important scenes, but has stuff that helps with character building that doesn't just feel like filler. Like, everything that he has is important, even if it's not directly related to the main story. And when you watch Jojo Rabbit, I feel like it's like the culmination of his storytelling abilities and his, directing style. My favorite, I love the scene at the end when they're dancing to David Bowie. Oh my gosh. It's amazing. But his framing, I feel like his movies are also very, very colorful, especially movies in this time frame. They're usually they're colored very drab, But he goes out of the way to have colorful costumes for the characters, as well as the color coding, which makes it seem very bright and very, kind of whimsical, how you would maybe view Germany now, but not during that time frame. Which, again, I think is like a testament to the fact that it's like a kid as the main character. So, of course, things are a bit over the top, which is also attributed to the fact it's a comedy. But it's also really, like, bright and colorful and caricaturized at points as well. But, yeah. You have anything else to say on it?
No, nothing really else to say. We think we've covered it all in that sense. I do want to go back, though, and touch on how you said that. Taika can take, like, these, like, simple moments, though, in the way he directs in the shots. Like, he can make them very powerful moments.
Yes.
And I think he does that really well. And an example of that I think he does really amazing is Taika, the most recent thing he directed was the season 1 finale of The Mandalorian last year.
Oh, yeah.
And it's really well done. It's really well directed. But there are so many, like, great shots in there. He builds suspense really well. But at the end, the character that he voices, a droid named IG-11, sacrifices himself. And it's when they come out of, like, this cave that instead of, like, a river to get through, they have to go through lava. And so this droid just, like, sacrifices himself and blows up all these stormtroopers. But the way he takes, like, just, like, this simple moment of this droid walking forward and blowing up, the way he builds it up and with the music and everything and the shots and the way the camera moves and pans around, it's just made to be a very powerful moment. Like, you can argue this moment doesn't need to be powerful, and that's fine too. You can believe that, but he still makes it a powerful moment, and it still feels like it belongs in that episode.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and again, I think it's similar to Marvel, where he couldn't really show his true colors and directing style because it has to fit within the Mandalorian. It would feel so out of place if he kind of did it. in
Well,
his
that's
own
what
style,
interests
but-
me about going forward, because Taika's next film, which he's actually doing right now, they've started shooting, is Thor: Love and Thunder with Chris Hemsworth, Natalie Portman, Tessa Thompson, and Christian Bale. They're doing Thor: Love and Thunder, and then after that, Taika is filming the next Star Wars movie for Disney.
I'm really excited for that. I think
And
will
he's
do
writing
so well.
it.
But I think Star Wars definitely still has such a level of where they try and make things comedic and they try and make it, colorful, not super whimsical, but there still is a little bit of that sense of, it's sci-fi. More so than The Mandalorian has, where The Mandalorian's a bit more, I don't want to say down to earth because it's still sci-fi and that sounds so incorrect, but do you know what I mean? Where it's more kind of allowed to be more out there, more experimental. Say what you want about, like,
a lot of Star Wars.
The original
Yeah,
one,
a lot
it
of
was
Star
really
Wars
just
from
them-
George Lucas. Very experimental, very groundbreaking stuff that he made and created just for these films, or that he tried with. The whole pod racing arena in Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, those stands filled with people, that's all miniatures.
Yeah.
Like, so much of those movies are miniatures or painted glass. In Episode 6, Return of the Jedi, the scene on the Death Star where Vader and the Emperor arrive, and you've got like the rows and rows of stormtroopers. Like, there's hundreds and thousands of stormtroopers in that long hallway room. That's just a small room with painted glass to look like that. Like, it's all illusions. It's so amazing what they did for those movies.
And what comes to mind when you bring up something like that is one of my favorite, or my favorite shot from Thor Ragnarok was, when they're Valkyrie, there's like the battle with all the Valkyries, when it's like that flashback and it shows as they're like kind of suspended in midair and the light is just going around them and the shadows are being cast and it's super like dreamlike but so vibrant. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
That is so amazing, and I watched a video on how he did it. Is that it's essentially just like 2 seconds of time where the stuff is kind of suspended in air and there's light going around them just super fast to make that like shifting of light effect, and that is just, I mean, it's hard to reuse like a shot technique like that, but I wish they would, and then he would in the new Star Wars movie, because that is just amazing. It's so satisfying. It's just so beautiful. But just stuff like that, like I feel like he's very inventive and has such like a vibrant and concise like creativity where there's just stuff that he can just will into fruition, just exact ideas, and he's so good at like, I don't know, just presenting them on screen that it's so satisfying. Yeah.
All right, so I think that's all we have to say on Taika, unless you've got anything else to add, Ava.
I mean, I could talk all day, but I'd probably just end up going in circles. But I really love Taika Waititi. I think he is. I feel like I can safely say he's my favorite director of all time.
It's definitely going to be interesting to see where he goes from here, doing Star Wars and doing another Thor, which I'm sure the other Thor will be loved and as positively received as Ragnarok was, because overall Ragnarok was really well received and really loved.
Yeah.
So we'll just have to wait and see what happens.
Yeah.
But thank you all for listening to this episode of 21st Century Cinema. As you know, our episodes are monthly right now, and hopefully in the summer we'll be back to bi-weekly. So this month we talked about Taika Waititi. Tune in with us next month. It's going to be me and Noah Shepherd sitting down to discuss HBO Max releasing Warner Brothers' entire movie slate direct to streamers this year. That's right, every Warner Brothers movie is going to theaters, but since theaters are so limited, you're also going to be able to watch it right away on release from streaming in your own home. And how is that going to impact the future of streaming and movie theaters? We're going to talk about that. And then in April, I know we're going to be back to talk about the Snyder Cut, and in March, we'll have Ava back to talk about something else, which who knows what that's going to be at this point, but it'll be something. We'll talk about something. So yes, once again, thank you guys so much for listening, and also don't forget to check in with us in February. We will be announcing our new merch giveaway and how that's going to work in February with all the details, and you'll have from February to March to enter that. So stay tuned for that, and thank you guys again for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to 21st Century Cinema. Be sure to follow 21st Century Cinema on all of our social medias, which are linked below and hyperlinked in the description. You can follow us and our hosts, and we look forward to seeing you in the next episode.